Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, Opera's code signing certificate gets compromised, resulting in malware getting pushed out via their automatic update systems. Plus, we'll give you details on HP's Backdoor built into some of their high-end products, a big batch of your questions, our answers, and much, much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi, everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 116 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly Systems Network and Administration podcast. We stream this episode live on June 27th, 2013. This episode is brought to you by GoDaddy.com, and I'll tell you more about GoDaddy as the show goes on. And the live stream is powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at ScaleEngine.com. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Hello, sir. Hello. I'm joining you from a Rocky Mountain hideout this week. Spent a couple of weeks in Hong Kong last week, and now I'm in a Rocky Mountain hideout, a.k.a. the Unfiltered Bunker. I just decided to stay here since doing the show last night.
I mostly don't leave my house.
Yeah. No, I don't either. I got a green screen so that way I can feel better about myself. Well, Alan, guess what?
I don't have problems with self-esteem.
I think we have. Well, that's because you're Canadian, and they inbred up there. I don't understand how it works.
Something like that.
But all the Canadians I know, they don't have that problem. But here in America, you see green screens are selling like crazy. Like crazy. And I got myself a height-adjustable chair, and I think there's something in that,
too. That makes a big difference.
Yeah. All right, big show today. Great feedback. We've gotten questions submitted over Twitter, BitMessage, email, Reddit, the IRC. It's like a whole plethora of stuff. It's a great.
Well, it'd be nice if they just, concentrated them into one place.
Well, yes. But
But we're willing to take your questions.
We are ambidextrous for communications.
Something like that.
Well, why don't we start with this Opera story that seems like it could be like, I don't know. It seems like Opera's acted quick, but it could have been a nightmare.
Well, there's so little detail, it's hard to say exactly what happened. Yeah. But on June 19th, which was about a week ago, Opera uncovered, halted, and contained, in their words, a targeted attack on their internal network infrastructure. They say that there's no evidence at this time that any user data was compromised, but again, that's always the kind of thing where you prove that it didn't happen rather than assume that it didn't happen.
Well, we don't have any logs.
So we assume that all the user data was compromised until they can prove it wasn't.
Right.
But anyway, they say that at this point, there's no evidence to say that it was compromised. However, the attackers were able to obtain at least one of Opera's code signing certificates, meaning that they could write some malware, sign it with the Opera code signing certificate, and when you get that little pop-up message on your machine saying, do you want to let this program run, instead of saying unknown author or whatever, it says, don't worry, you can trust this software. It's from Opera.
Right. It's green, so, it's safe.
You at that point, you kind of assume that it's legitimate software.
I would.
Yes. And because of that, it was actually, they detected it actively being used for malware. So this isn't just something that could have happened. This is actually happening.
Okay.
This allowed the attackers to distribute malicious software which incorrectly appeared to have been published by Opera software or appeared to be the Opera browser when it wasn't. They say it's also possible that a few thousand Windows users who were using Opera between 1 a.m. and 1:36 a.m. UTC on June 19th may have automatically received and installed malicious software.
Automatically?
So it sounds like their auto-update server was compromised and a malware-infected version of Opera signed with their code signing certificate was pushed out to the auto-update server. And every client who called in to say, hey, is there an update? And got the notification that there was, downloaded and ran the malware.
Well, we've always speculated what would happen if one of these auto-update systems were compromised or there's some sort of man-in-the-middle attack.
It seems possibly on this one that they claim that the code signing certificate that was compromised was expired. So maybe that would have popped up a warning sometimes, but not always.
Okay.
Also, for that to work, it requires your computer to know what time it is. Although usually, sometimes people's clocks are off by a couple of minutes, but they're usually not wrong by years or anything.
Right. They move fast.
Yeah,
Operative.
but,
they responded pretty quick.
Fairly fast, I think. But, again, without more detail, we don't know what happened. Like, how long were the attackers in there before they noticed?
Right. I just mean in terms of, it seems like the updates were only being pushed out for a couple of hours. That's
right.
good. That
Or
part's
for 37 minutes or whatever.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like more detail on it. When I just was randomly, when we were talking about this in the IRC chat room, I was kind of speculating. I kind of envisioned that the way this went down was some secretary got a phishing email that said, oh, check out these pictures from last night, click or whatever. And then she got infected, and then the island hopped, and then they got into some other part of the network that's supposed to be air-gapped, but wasn't.
Right.
And so on.
Probably a good theory, Alan. Probably a pretty good theory. It could just be something simple like that. Well, I know Opera's not huge out there, but the Opera went on to say users are strongly urged to update the latest version of Opera as soon as it's available.
Which basically revokes so that Opera won't trust their own certificate.
And use reputable antivirus. Oh, okay, Opera. Well, thanks. Thanks for letting us know. Wow. All right. Well, very good. Any other thoughts on that one?
No, not that one.
All right. Well, let's change gears and talk about maybe the value of a Gmail account.
Yes, technically any email account, although this one's specifically targeted at Gmail.
Okay. Lay it on me.
How much is your Gmail account worth? So this is Krebs on Security, site we feature quite a bit because they do good work. And he's got this article about the University of Illinois at Chicago has developed this new tool called Cloud Sweeper. So basically, this connects to your Gmail account via OAuth, so you don't have to give it your Gmail account password. And it scans through all the emails that you have, and it finds any accounts that are linked to your Gmail account.
Huh.
Right? So, like, whether you've signed up for Amazon, Apple,
gosh.
Groupon, Hulu, Newegg, PayPal, Skype, Uplay, Yahoo, Steam, all the different services that might be valuable.
Should I try it?
Sure. If an attacker were to compromise your Gmail account, they could reset the passwords for all of those different accounts, right? And maybe gain control over those accounts. So this service goes through and indexes and finds which ones are actually linked to your Gmail. Then they have an index where they've gone around to a bunch of these different underground forums where basically hacked accounts are bought and sold, and checked how much is, say, an Amazon.com account worth versus a Hulu account or a Netflix account or PayPal and so on and so on.
All right, scanning my account right now. I did my personal account, not my JB account.
Right.
Because I don't think I have as much stuff associated with that. I just hit the $20 mark.
Yeah, so for each account that they find, they have a dollar value based on an average of what that account sells for on various forums. So then at the end, they give you this readout of how much your account would be worth to an attacker if they were managed to compromise it. Then they also have a second feature that you have to opt into because it's more intrusive. But it scans through all your email and find anywhere where you have passwords in plain text. I'm guessing they have the templates and some heuristics from these different services.
Wow, it also identifies all the email password resets that I have in there. I've got them in there for a lot.
Yes. So it finds all the ones where the actual password is listed in the email, right? Because a good password reset will have a URL you click, and then it takes you somewhere and you have to enter a new password, right? So that the password is never written down anywhere. Whereas some will generate a random password and email it to you, which isn't as good. So it scans for all the emails that have plain text passwords in them. And then there's a feature you can use where it will go through, log into your Gmail over IMAP, which I think at this point actually requires your password. I'm not sure if you can do that with OAuth or not. And it will actually edit out your emails and either redact the password, so it'll go through all those old reset emails and delete the password for you.
That's awesome.
Or it can replace it with an encrypted string and then give you a decryption key or a QR code that you can use to come back to Cloud Sweeper and decrypt it later on.
That is so cool.
Although that assumes that this is going to keep running, right?
Yeah,
if you do that and then years from now it's not there, but you can always do a new password reset. So, but yeah, this way your plain text passwords are not laying around in your Gmail account.
Well, and remember, wasn't there also like a finding that email that's over 180 days or something like that is considered abandoned and then has a completely different legal status? And if you think about the fact that you could have email that contains passwords in there, it's over 180 days.
That could be, confiscated by the government or whatever. This way, the password isn't in plain text for them to see.
Yeah. This is really cool. So if somebody got my account, they'd get $30. Doesn't seem worth it.
Well, that's an average. They might get more. And I don't know, if you can steal 100 Gmail accounts and they're each worth $30, that's $3,000.
Yep, you could buy a few Bitcoins with that.
Yep.
Well, that's really cool. That's an interesting little endeavor to try. We'll have links to the article in CloudSweeper. Have you tried it? You can do
Krebs also, no, I haven't tried it. Although from memory, almost nothing is linked to my Gmail. Oh. I have almost everything's linked to one of my personal domains.
Good man.
Where I have a catch-all system and everything. It's mostly because I've had that since before there was Gmail.
Right. Yep.
And I mostly keep Gmail is almost all stuff actually related to the show and stuff.
That's probably a good way to go.
Although my Gmail has a couple of things, specifically like my utilities are set up to my Gmail because I know that's never going to be down or go away or something. Right?
Right. Yeah. You might take your mail server offline for something.
Yeah. And I don't want my, electric bill tied to some old email address.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Krebs also has a separate article from about a year ago about naming and shaming the plain text offenders, right? All those sites that do password resets and so on in plain text. Right? We were adding them to the Hall of Shame for a while, but it got a little too
because there's so many of them, and our audience kept finding
more. So there
more
are actually 2 websites out there dedicated to making lists of these.
Oh, here we go.
plaintextoffenders.com, and the other one is passwordfail.com, and they actually have a browser extension. So when a domain is known to do this extension will warn you when you go to the site before you sign up, saying, are you sure you want to sign up? Because these guys are going to send you the password in plain text.
That is so great.
Right? Because a lot of people, a comment I saw from a number of people when they sent in the plain text password offenders to us was that, I didn't know these guys did this until after I paid them.
Yep.
And now I wish I hadn't. So
because sometimes you don't even find out until you do a password reset.
Right. Or, when they mail you the password when you first sign up. They're like, oh, we're being helpful. It's like, no, you're not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, passwordfail.com is a great one. That's really cool.
Yes, because they have the extension,
so you've got
makes it
plaintextoffenders.com and passwordfail.com. That way you can mark them for being, or you can name and shame them. I like that, Alan. Okay. Yep. All right, any other thoughts on that one?
Nope.
All right.
That's it for this.
Then stand by, Alan, because I've got to tell you about something that's fantastic, something that's amazing, something that's incredible, and that is this week's sponsor, GoDaddy.com. GoDaddy, the world's #1 domain name registrar. Perfect if you're out there setting up yourself a small business website. Maybe you've got a contracting gig, you need to create a website for somebody, or maybe you're just an employee sitting at the desk and you just want to get something done real quick, or heck, maybe you just got a great idea. Like me, every now and then. I was thinking toejams.com. Went to go register it, already taken. Somebody already had toejams.com. Who would have known? But if I was going to buy toejams.com, I would have used the code TECH249. TECH249 when I'm checking out, get you the .com for $2.49. Additional .coms.
So cheap.
Crazy cheap. Crazy cheap. I have bought apps now that cost more than that. So that tells you something right there. Maybe you're going to get yourself a .co. You want to get maybe some hosting, something like that? Use the code 35OFF3. 35OFF3 will get you 35% off your entire order over at GoDaddy. And do yourself a favor. If you're going to be buying something like this, do like what Alan was saying about his Gmail account, where you want to have something that's not going to go away. You don't want to register your domain somewhere that's not going to be here in a few years. You don't do that. Don't do that.
So many times I've seen clients register their domain with an email address like that's from their ISP. And that's definitely the one you don't want to use because you never know when you're going to decide to switch ISPs. Or just your ISP is going to be like, oh, right, we got bought by somebody else and your domain is now this. And a year from now, we're going to stop supporting the old domain.
There you go. That's exactly it. So apply that same logic when you're buying your domain because you don't want that to get moved around, transferred, or for them to shut down. Go to GoDaddy.com. Use the code TECH249 when you check out, or 35OFF3 to get 35% off that entire order. And thanks to GoDaddy for the longtime support of the TechSNAP program.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Alan. Well, now that that's all done, we got one more story to get to, and this one made my jaw drop. First of all, I expected more from HP. Second of all, it sounds pretty egregious from what I've read so far. So tell me what's going on with this. Is it like an HP backup system?
Yeah, so HP has this backup system called D2D/Store Ones. Basically, it's a deduplication backup product. So as you store your backups to it, it doesn't store the same block twice.
Sure.
The amazing thing is that they charge $80,000 for these machines. And it turns out...
And what file system do you suppose they're using?
I don't know. I'm guessing it's done quite horribly and manually, not actually just using ZFS or something.
Yeah.
Especially, these are kind of old, so I don't even think ZFS
right.
was as popular back then.
It doesn't say on their spec page.
Nope. Well, yeah, I'm sure it's quite secret and proprietary for them.
Yeah.
But it turns out that these devices have an undocumented support user named HP Support, which has a fixed 7-character password. And if you SSH into it, you have administrator access. Yeah, so that means every one of these devices that's out there has this HP Support user, and they all have the same 7-character password.
And it gets root access.
Yes.
HP Support is the username.
Yeah, with the HP and the S being uppercase. What happens if a user were to brute force that password? They would then have SSH access to every Store 1 device deployed anywhere in the world, as long as, they weren't behind a firewall that blocked SSH or something. It just so happens that someone has done that.
Oh, surprise, surprise.
And they've even been helpful enough to provide the SHA-1 hash of the password. So basically, this researcher found the problem, contacted HP about it, worked with them for a couple of weeks, and then, he said it seemed like they were literally trying to troll him in that they just kept wasting his time, and then they went a couple of weeks without answering, so he decided to publish anyway. Rather than just publish the plain text password for everybody to start attacking these, he posted it as the SHA-1 hash because it provides some level of protection, but it's easily crackable. So this way, it'll cause a small delay. Basically, hey, HP, you have until people crack this.
It's a time bomb. It's a freaking time bomb.
Time.
Yes. Yeah. Wow.
It is kind of a compromise between just closing it all right away or continuing to wait for HP.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting.
Also, knowing that the password is 7 characters definitely lowers the
difficulty of what you have to guess.
The key space that you would have to search.
Yeah.
Now, HP has come out and said they will release a patch that will disable that support account on July 7th.
Well,
not sure why it's going to take 2 weeks.
And the only way they said to disable it in the meantime is to contact HP support.
Yes. They say, quote, in the interim, customers who wish to disable the backdoor can contact HP support for assistance with this. HP support personnel will provide the assistance to manually disable the HP user account. But the fact that they call it a backdoor and realize that's how bad it is.
Yeah. Well, and if you were going to make a backdoor into something, you would call it. I mean, this is just me just being conspiracy, but you would call it a support account, right? Like if you knew you were going to put a backdoor account into every single product you make, you're not going to call it super secret backdoor account because that would be incriminating. You're going to call it backdoor account. I mean, you're going to call it support account because then that just looks like, oh, we were just making a support account. It's just a support account. What? It's a big deal. It's a support account. No big deal. We'll turn that off. We got a patch for you. This is embarrassing. And these are enterprise grade, big data, important infrastructure products. Ridiculous. From HP of all places, Alan. That's why I say just build free NAS boxes. Right? Solves the problem.
Right, exactly.
Are you correcting someone in the chat room?
Did we talk about that article last week? I don't think we did. No, we should have.
What? Shit. What?
There's an article from a guy at Bling Bling about how he fixed his NAS by replacing it with FreeNAS.
Oh.
Or actually, he used a FreeBSD box and did it manually, but...
Fixing the network attached storage with commodity? Does that sound right?
Yes, that's the one. Did we cover that?
No. I just found it while you were talking about it. Looks good, though. Many years ago, I finally got sick of failing disk and the panic that follows.
I'll throw it in the roundup.
Oh, okay. Very good. Looks good. I'll take a look at that. In fact, we have we're getting close to there now. One of our feedback questions is about some best practices on a free NAS, so it'll all work. Cool. All right. Well, anything else we want to cover in the news?
I have a link to the researchers data about it because it's quite useful. HP also said HP identified a potential security issue. HP admitted to it. They didn't identify it. This other guy did. A security issue with older HP StoreOnce models. This does not impact the StoreOnce systems that run version 3 of the software, including the StoreOnce B6200 and StoreOnce VSA. Seems like they only offer their newest software for their newer models. It's not like it's just people haven't upgraded their older software. It's that, they don't support the old stuff. Anyway, they say HP takes security issues very seriously and is actively working on a fix. If they took security issues very seriously, they wouldn't have a backdoor account in your device.
Yeah, no kidding, right? That would have been
And you think they would have learned, in December of 2010, HP basically had the same problem with their regular NAS devices, where there was a backdoor account.
Oh. I had forgotten all about that.
Oh, yes, we fixed that, but we kind of forgot that, our backup devices would have the same problem.
Jeez. Do you think maybe they put them in there on purpose? Do you really think it's just for support purposes? Do you really think that's what it is? Because you don't need to have a root account like that to be able to pull that off. You could just...
Eventually you need root if you want, but if you call HP support and say, my backup device isn't working properly, fix it, then they're going to need root, right?
Yeah, I guess so. It just seems like maybe they could do, like, instead of having it to be a... Well, I guess yes. The question to your answer is yes. So I guess where my issue is that they used a username and password. They should have done a key or something.
No. What they should have is some system where I, as the administrator of the device, log in and say, I would like to let HP provide support. And it makes a random new password that I provide HP. They log in, do their thing, and then that stops working after a day or something.
That would work. You know what? Back in the
token type thing.
Back in the day, as they say, it wouldn't be too uncommon to have a vendor have a modem dial in. And then they would dial in and they would have full root access when they dialed in. But as the IT guy, I would just unplug the modem. And so when it was time for them to have support, I would call up their support and say, okay, your modem's plugged in. And we would have to have a line for them and we'd have to have a modem, and it was expensive. But it was a very easy way to sort of control the level of access they got, but still give them full control.
In this case, the problem is that this account is undocumented. So people running these devices, even people that are good at security, didn't know that account was there to deal with it.
Right. I mean, you can lock down the system all day long. You can take all the precautions you want. But if it's got this root account just hanging open with a 7-character password, and it's the same thing shared across all of the devices, I mean, that just makes it huge.
That's the worst part, yes, is that the password is the same for every one of these devices ever.
Yeah.
It's not like they based it on the MAC address of the device or something so that it wouldn't be the same for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's still horrible, but that's awful too.
If they had based it on the serial number or something so that it would at least be different for each of these devices, but it's not.
Jedi in the chat room says it's probably because they want to be able to fix those people that when they call in and say, help, I've lost my password, you have to reset it for me. And then that's the only way they can do it.
But you can still do that without doing things the wrong way.
All right, well, any other thoughts on that one, Alan?
That one, no.
All right, then you know what that means. I think that was the last story, right? Yes?
When
you say it like that, I was thinking no. But all right. Alan has links to that as well as the full disclosure researcher like he mentioned in the show notes. You can find that over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. Just look for TechSNAP 116 and then scroll down past the download links and you'll see the show notes and the links to stuff that Alan covered. All right, Alan, with the news all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the top of our website, or even better, submitting a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And Alan, we had a special birthday wish to put out there from the IRC chat room, don't we?
Yes.
For Project Morris.
Project Morris, who contributed to the show quite a bit, wrote in and said, please have an extra big show today as it's my birthday.
Happy birthday, Project Morris. Of course, I have a stomach bug, so I don't know. I don't know if it's our biggest show, but it's an average to large size show today. And it starts now, even getting larger with our emails. First one was an interesting thread that you must have spotted this on Reddit, I guess. I thought you didn't go to Reddit.
Yes. I got linked to it from somewhere else.
Caught you. This is an interesting question. What is the lifespan of a data on a hard drive that sits and is rarely turned on?
Right.
Now, I've actually wondered the opposite, because all of my systems, my drives are spinning 24/7.
Right, and then generally in that case they work fine.
Yeah.
But the question here is, will the drive last longer because you're not using it, right? Because the general idea is the drive won't wear out that way.
But will it sort of seize, maybe? Like, will the because I'm thinking of a spinning drive, not an SSD.
Right.
I'm wondering if it'll kind of. What do you think? Did you see any insights in the thread that?
Mostly they're talking about apparently the thing they aim for is to avoid having. Basically, the bit is good for 10 years once it's set.
The bit is, okay.
But they didn't really talk about whether rewriting it helps or not, and so on.
Yeah, because, so it's a matter of the magnetics just kind of give out after 10 years.
Yeah.
So I wonder how does that apply to an SSD? We don't know.
Yeah. SSDs are too new, basically.
Yeah, we'll find out. It's an interesting thread, and we'll have a link to it if you guys want to read through it. All right, now let's get to the questions. So our first question that we're going to get to today is the one that was submitted to our subreddit. It's about a captive portal solution. I'm wondering if you've solved this problem. It says, Aloha! I'm trying to gain more IT experience, and I've recently hooked up a nonprofit in my area who's looking to implement a Linux server as a web proxy, Samba server, and captive portal. The organization wants captive portal for a low-income community internet cafe. Some access will be free, some will require a payment, and other access will be restricted for bandwidth concerns. I tackled the proxy using Squid and Samba first, and the captive portal is kicking my butt. I looked into Zental, as suggested by the G+ community. Zental made it really easy to set up the server and captive portal module, but when I was looking into customizing, it looks like a substantial amount of work. It says I come across a few other solutions, but any advice would be appreciated. So, Alan, what do you think for doing a captive portal?
Generally, I use pfSense as the router, and it has a captive portal built in.
Right. Yeah, I think that's generally my recommendation, too. There's a few different projects out there, but I was wondering, you see, one of the things that he was trying to accomplish is doing all of it on one Linux box if possible. Of course, that's where pfSense won't fit the bill. But you might consider doing a VM, maybe.
Right.
What do you think of that? A pfSense VM to do a captive portal?
To do, yeah. I don't know how... The captive portal generally has to be doing the NAT for it to work, as far as I'm aware.
Very good point. Yes, it does. Well,
yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that was my advice for him. All right. We'll move on to the next question. Next question is from Covariant. He says he has a question about web browser security in Windows. Okay, so like most people, I have to run Windows for various reasons. Recently, I've gotten smarter about the way I protect my computer. I want to know how you secure it and think my setup is. I run Windows 7 not as an administrator, but as a standard user. I have antivirus software installed with heuristics. I only web browse through a virtual machine running Ubuntu. I have Firefox inside the VM with Web of Trust, AdBlock Plus, NoScript, FlashBlock. How secure do you think the setup is for web browsing? Wow, Covariant. You are jumping through some hoops there. So he's doing all his web browsing inside a VM running on Windows with AdBlock, with NoScript, with FlashBlock.
Right.
That sounds like a brutal...
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like it wouldn't be very usable. So it depends, if that works for you, sure. But generally, you can do a bunch of different things.
Yeah. As long as you're in a VM, I guess if you're in a VM, the only reason you'd be doing all that other stuff is because you don't want to be tracked. Because if you're in a VM, you don't really have to worry about it jumping to the host OS. Nothing from the web like that. Covariant, to me, that sounds like you're definitely, you're about as secure as you're going to get in that setup. I would almost wonder why you need to be that secure. Maybe you're doing something illegal, right? Speaking of which, we'll have a roundup story about that. All right, Alan, somebody wants to take you to task. Killed by Snoo. Says, I love all of the shows. I always agree with Alan, except this one time. Before I begin, I want to point out that I have an aim of running a mail server at home is to store all my emails myself so no one else has a copy. I've been running it for about 2 years under the stairs, and it's worked perfectly.
Yes.
The only 4 points that I can see are, it's against the ISP terms of service, but that doesn't apply in all locations.
Right.
ISP often blocks 25. A lot of our large email providers will block that domestic IPs. But he says, simply doing a reverse tunnel or VPN to a remote server/VPN service to get around 7325 and also having non-domestic IP addresses. Pros: data is never stored on the remote server, and all data between you and the remote server is encrypted, so your ISP has no idea what's happening. Cons: if your home server internet goes down, then you lose all of the mail and the time the tunnel.
There are backup MX services, like DNSMadeEasy.com has one where they'll be your backup MX, and they'll basically just spool the email and then forward it to your server when you're back online. If you're running a mail server and you don't have a backup MX, you're doing it wrong.
Here's the way he's doing it. Method I'm currently using is an Amazon free tier tiny server for 1 year, no charge. I receive all the mail there. I set up a postfix MTA server, and I relay that email server over TLS to my home server. For sending email, I set my SMTP server to use TLS on a non-standard port on both servers. Then I told the Amazon server where it should forward the mail to. I also configured the Amazon postfix server to retry sending emails for up to 24 hours before failing to deliver. So if my home connection ever dies, it will continually try to send the email for the next 24 hours before reporting back a failure. That's interesting. What do you think, Alan? There's maybe using a VPN or doing something like that?
The problem there is defeating the purpose, though, because if the purpose was to make sure nobody's getting access to your email, if you're just hosting it in the cloud somewhere where the government could mandate that they give them access, then you've already lost.
Right, I guess
right?
the assumption
if you're paying for a server in the cloud to sit there and accept the mail and then forward it to you, you could just store the email on the server in the cloud in the first place, right?
That's what I'm wondering. Yeah. And if all of the email coming in and out of that, I mean, it's easier to wiretap and monitor probably an Amazon data center or a Google data center than to find you out. Like they just go to Amazon and say we just want to watch this virtual machine for a few days, and Amazon could probably set that up for them. Whereas if they want to monitor your specific home internet connection, they've probably got to go to the CO down the street from you, which is much more challenging. I don't know. I do kind of dig the idea of the VPN, though. What do you think of that? So instead of sending directly from your home IP, you send out a VPN.
Yeah, that solves part of the problem. But again, if you're paying for a VPN, then you could just pay for the mail service, right? So sure, you could use a VPN. I guess that works.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, you're right. You're just not going to ever admit that you like the idea of a home server, I think.
Well, I have a home server. I use it for storing files and stuff. I just wouldn't use it for my email.
Yeah. All right, we got another question. This one came in from BitMessage. How about that? He says, a follow-up to the latest TechSNAP on the question for how to run Tor in a VM. It's called Wonix. Used to be called Torbox in the past. WHONIX. It's an anonymous general-purpose operating system based on VirtualBox, Debian, and Tor. He says, by design, IP and DNS leaks are impossible. Not even with malware with root rights can find out the user's real IP or location. It includes the SourceForge link. That sounds neat. Maybe people can give that a look and let us know what they think. I like the idea of the virtual appliance. Yeah. Kevin writes in. He says, hi, Chris and Alan. I was wondering if there's a way to have SSL verification that can be cached by any proxy. I always force HTTPS on websites because I want to ensure that my visitor gets my content. For some information, encryption is important, but often I just want verification. The problem is that HTTPS traffic can't be cached by intermediate proxies unless they have my site's cert. I was wondering if there's any way of there was a way of sort of SSL that provided verification in any way that can be cached on a proxy, for example, like Squid. So he wants to run all his stuff on HTTPS, but he also doesn't want to cheat himself out of some caching. Sounds like if somebody has a...
Well, normally, like browsers cache HTTPS nowadays anyway.
Yeah, he's thinking more of midline proxies.
Okay.
So I think he's thinking of like somebody is behind a network proxy or something like that.
Right.
Is there any way to do that?
I don't know.
All right. Well, I'll let you put a note in here about FreeNAS 9.1.0 in here.
Yes, there's a beta of FreeNAS that's out now. So it's FreeNAS 9.1 beta, although it's actually based on FreeBSD 9 stable. So that's basically 9.1 plus everything that's considered stable so far. And that branch will eventually become 9.2, but 9.2 is not going to be for a couple more months yet. But if you remember, I think 2 weeks ago, we talked about how things like ZFS trim support had just been merged into 9 stable. So that means that this new FreeNAS 9.1 beta will have the latest features like ZFS LZ4 compression. Basically, before, your options for compression were LZHA and gzip. The one was low power but low compression. The other one took a lot of CPU time and had better compression. But LZ4 gives you this hybrid that gives good compression with a lot less CPU time than gzip. So it's a nice trade-off. ZFS trim support. FreeNAS 9.1 beta also has improvements to their disk encryption stuff. The previous version of FreeNAS 8.3.1 or whatever was the first one they offered with disk encryption, and so they've made some improvements since then. Also, the beta includes the new overhauled plugin jail system. Before, you could only have one plugin jail. Now you can have multiple, and they can have separate IP addresses and stuff. And also, they've built this... you actually can take a PCBSD machine and use the Warden to construct the plugin jail, package it up, and then deploy it onto the FreeNAS machine. So it makes it much easier to manage and deploy these plugin jails.
Very nice. One more
so
question.
It's not considered production quality yet, right? It's a beta, but if you want to try it out and see some of the cool stuff that's going on in the newest FreeNAS, it was posted yesterday.
I got a tweet from Matt. He said, I should be getting my FreeNAS Mini Plus tomorrow with 12 terabytes of storage.
Nice.
Any first steps or best practices you guys recommend for setting up a new ZFS network attached storage? What do you think, Alan? If you got a big array, what do you do?
FreeNAS, you don't have to do much.
Right. I mean, that's kind of the thing. But
one of the other things FreeNAS 9.1 beta has is more recommendations on how to lay out your pool and stuff. Do you ever do any drive? Do you ever do drive stress testing or any kind of anything like that? Not generally. Yeah. ZFS means that if one of those drives fails, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean,
like he was talking, he's going to have 12 terabytes. How many hard drives?
Probably 4.
6. Well, right, okay. Yeah, because it's just if you're going to have, I was misthinking for a minute and thought you said 12 drives, and I was like. With ZFS, you generally don't want to have an array, an individual VDEV that has more than 9 devices in it. So you'd want to probably split that into 2 6s or something. But yeah, with just 4, you'd just probably be doing RAID Z1 or something to that effect, or 2 pairs of mirrors.
We got a note in here. Speaking of IX systems and FreeNAS, yes. they got a new hire. Yes.
Just the other day was the 20th anniversary of FreeBSD. And in an announcement that kind of goes along with that, Jordan Hubbard, who's the guy that co-founded FreeBSD back in 1993, announced that he's leaving Apple after 12 years to work with FreeBSD full-time at IX Systems, where he will focus on improvements to FreeNAS and TrueNAS and some new products that they plan to come out with.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
Very great.
So it's always nice to see some of the bigger people from FreeBSD back to working on FreeBSD full-time instead of trying to clean up the mess that is Apple's version of Unix.
And over at IX is a great place to go.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. That is the feedback. And you can send us yours at techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com or use the contact link at the top of our website or start a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And we'll feature your question in a future episode of the TechSNAP program. But with the feedback all done, it means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that didn't quite fit at the top of the show, but we still want to talk about them. Give you some links to follow up on your own. And a lot of these links came from our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. Alan, this first story in the Roundup has got me all fired up. It's got me all worked up because, of course, I've been recommending people start doing some of these things through continued leaks that The Guardian has posted from Edward Snowden. Mm-hmm. It's been revealed that how the NSA treats when they come across American citizens' data, what actions they're supposed to take, how they're supposed to treat it. And what comes out is if the data that they collect is encrypted, they say, and in the event that intercepted communication is later deemed to be from a U.S. person, they are required to promptly destroy that material unless the communications are enciphered or reasonably believed to contain secret meaning and sufficient duration may consist of any period of time during which encrypted material is subject to or use of encrypted analysis. Other conditions which U.S. intercepted communications may be retained include when it's reasonably believed to contain evidence of a crime has been committed. Also, and this seems like a loophole that's just a little too big, they've disclaimed that if they can retain your data in order for traffic analysis purposes to run maintenance on their database and get metrics, they're also allowed to retain the data. And that would seem like that's a loophole.
Maintenance on their database? That's such a broad term. You can claim anything with that.
Yeah, if storing your data helps them measure their traffic and gain metrics for their database, for purposes of database maintenance, according to the NSA, they're allowed to keep your data.
Well, it sounds more like, they're using your data as a sample of what's normal to compare other people's against. But, some of those loopholes are just so big.
Well, and the encryption thing, if you're using Tor, then you get flagged.
Well, no, but if you're connecting to Gmail over HTTPS.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, right?
Gmail doesn't let you connect not over HTTPS.
Right.
So.
Right. And the irony is, of course, then it sends it out over SMTP in the clear text in the background. So, those are two really huge loopholes that I think a lot of people haven't really quite clicked with them. And you got to wonder, I'm sure they wouldn't be actively trying to crack encrypted communications, but maybe they would be storing them with the hope that they could crack them later on. I don't know. But I have recently started using GPG and Tor more. And
like I said, we don't encrypt our email, but we sign all of the outgoing email from our help desk, so that at least you can check that it was actually from us.
From you, it's legit. Yeah.
Yep.
Here's a story I didn't see. IRS wasn't fond of open source either, according to.
They actually have some reasonable criteria for that one. But yes, there's been a big news lately that the IRS was looking specifically at any groups trying to claim nonprofit status if they had anything to do with tea parties or fundamentalism or what was the other one? Some other keywords.
Yeah.
But also open source. Specifically, they say that a bunch of open source foundations seem to just be big companies trying to hide stuff, or groups of people planning to just sell support for software, right, through a foundation and make it nonprofit. And in those cases, it isn't. And this has actually come up with the FreeBSD project. They said, well, it was important that we raised a lot of money last year, the most money they'd ever raised. It was also important that it was, we also had the most number of separate donors that we've ever had, right? A majority of the money comes from a couple of big sponsors, a couple of individuals and a bunch of companies that donate large amounts of money. But it's also important the fact that, 1,400 individual people donated even just $5, because that helps with the IRS's test of, is this just a couple of big companies working together as a trade group?
Right.
Or is it actually a nonprofit foundation that's promoting and is actually, used by people, not just companies? And I think, that the IRS is paying very close attention to that. So it's important that the open source projects have funding not just from, a couple of big corporation sponsors, but also are getting funding from individual people to show that they're actually passing that test of being of value to individual people, not just to the 3 or 4 big donors.
Right, and be aware they're watching. Because
at that point, if the only people sponsoring their foundation are these 3 or 4 big companies, then technically it is more of a trade group than a foundation that's a nonprofit.
Right.
And there's different tax rules for trade groups than for foundations.
Maybe a font can save all of our problems from the NSA.
This one made me very upset with Slashdot, in fact, just because of the headline.
Introducing the NSA Proof Crypto Font.
Yes. So basically, it's this font that is designed to be immune to OCR, which is fine, right? And it was designed by this graphics design student from the University of Rhode Island or something.
They call it a disruptive typeface.
Yeah. So, and it's a little hard to read too, but and it kind of makes sense. Although if you use it for, it's only really useful in print. If you were to use this on a web page, someone can just change the font in CSS or something, and then it displays normally.
Right.
And no matter what, putting the word crypto in there is wrong, because there's no encryption. There's no cryptography at all. it's just an obfuscated font, right? It's just
Yeah.
funny-looking letters. It's not crypto anything. And, the fact that the editors let that slip through is...
Yeah. I swear,
bad.
it seems like Slashdot blows it on about one story a week, at least, on the headline.
Yeah, well, yeah, the people that run it now are not the same people that ran it before.
Yeah. All right, some new rules coming down from the EU to ISPs to require telcos to come clean within 24 hours of a data breach. This seems like a really good thing.
Yes. So the EU government is coming up with this new law that says that an ISP or telco that is compromised by an attacker must report to the National Data Protection Authorities within 24 hours the full nature and size of the breach. Huh. Although it doesn't say they necessarily have to notify the customers, but they have to at least tell the government. And then there's a small loophole there where if they don't know the full nature and size of the breach within 24 hours, they have to provide an initial report within the 24 hours and then a full one within 72 hours. But even that's fairly reasonable, right? It's still pretty much immediately, right? It's still not a lot of time to figure everything out, right? But it definitely forces them to, they're not going to be able to keep things under wraps with a law like this.
Yeah. That's good. I'd like to see something like that here.
Yeah, same here.
This one's pretty big. A Facebook bug exposed 6 million users. How come I'm not hearing a bunch of upset about this?
It's kind of slowly over years, and it wasn't that big of a deal. So basically, if you had Facebook on your phone, it would download all your friends into your address book. Now, if one of those friends had their privacy settings set so that you couldn't see their phone number, the address book would have their phone number anyway, because it would just download the data in bulk and wasn't checking whether you were allowed to see that person's phone number or email address. So if you had a friend on Facebook who wasn't sharing their phone number or email address with you, your phone would actually still get their email address and phone number. So, you still, for your information to be leaked to someone, you still had to have added them as a friend. It just means that your security settings weren't applying quite correctly.
So
that's why it's not a huge upset, right? It's not like anybody could go out there and do it, but yeah.
That makes sense. I remember Facebook's one of these companies that has their bug bounty program. I had
but I swear we talked about this bug like 6 months ago.
Maybe, yeah.
When somebody announced it. It seems that maybe they just got around to figuring out how to fix it.
I had a hacker from Dublin on, and Plan B, and he had found several different cross-site scripting vulnerabilities and then several other vulnerabilities on Coinbase, a popular Bitcoin site to buy Bitcoins, and it's an online wallet. And he participated in their bug bounty program. So we had him on this week's Plan B, if you guys want to check that out. And we talked to him a little bit about, why he chose to actually report the bugs instead of just exploiting them, because he found a way to essentially take over somebody's account and get access to their funds. Right. And he worked with Coinbase and worked within their program, and he received a bounty for it. And it was an interesting little chat. And so that was in Plan B episode 12, which came out this week. You guys want to hear that? All right, so I think we might have mentioned this story last week, but now we actually have a link. It's a little more details. Java 6, end of life by Oracle. Is this going to ruin for everything else?
No, because nobody should be still using Java 6
I think it's
to
what I
begin
asked you
with.
last week.
But it basically means that only if you have a corporate support contract with Oracle will you still get access to updates for Java 6. So, for example, Apple got an update for Java 6. They have update 51, even though the last publicly available update is like 47. So Apple and a few other corporate customers who, for some reason pay Oracle to still have support for Java 6 still get updates, but there will be no more public updates for Java 6. No more. So you definitely should be moved to Java 7 update 25 like a week ago when it came out. You definitely want to be running the latest Java, because otherwise you're in for a world of hurt.
No kidding. Now, you teased this story a little bit earlier. It was on Boing Boing. Fixing network-attached storage with commodity hardware and BSD. Now, this sounds like it's right up your alley, Alan. And I got to say, of course, I have a commodity hardware that runs.
Yes. Well, yeah, exactly. But yeah, so this guy had a NAS. I think it was a specific one.
One of those Netgears, right? or something? Or an HP
Yeah, it was basically an off-the-shelf
Yeah.
NAS, the Ready NAS.
Yep.
And eventually the power supply died. And the problem was that that model had been out of production for a while,
Right.
and there was no way to get a replacement power supply.
Right.
Even the next model after it was hard to find a replacement power supply for. And so he had no way of getting his machine back online to get the data out for it. And because it's, the Ready NAS proprietary everything, it had problems with it. So instead, he grabbed a little HP microserver and put FreeBSD on it and with ZFS and built a new NAS.
Nice.
The advantage to this is that every one of those components is now replaceable in case something happens.
Right.
Right. So if the power supply dies, he can replace it.
Mm-hmm.
If, because it's ZFS, it also means that he could, if, somehow, even though it won't happen, FreeBSD stopped supporting ZFS or something, he could run Illumos and import that ZFS pool. Right. Or, if the machine dies and all he has is the hard drives.
Yeah.
He could pop those into another machine that's running FreeBSD, Illumos, or even the Linux one. If you want to fight with getting ZFS to work on Linux, you can import that pool and get your data still.
That's my favorite thing about it, right there.
Yep.
Because when your machine dies, if you can only put them in a compatible machine, and you then have to wait for that thing to arrive, unless you've got another one sitting around.
Exactly. Like that's the problem with Unraid and some of those other proprietary ones we've seen from like Drobo and so on, is that compared to ZFS, you're stuck with the buying a replacement Drobo device.
Yep.
And at some point, they might break backwards compatibility.
In fact,
but
I think
also,
Drobo's recommended backup solution for that is to actually own a separate Drobo.
a separate second Drobo.
Yeah.
Buy them in pairs because we might not sell the one like the one you have.
Well,
on.
that's legit. That is legit too. Yeah, they about once a year they rev them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting that this article doesn't actually mention FreeNAS though.
Yeah.
Although in the comments, eventually it came up.
Yeah, I mean, he talks a lot about Ready NAS, but
Yeah.
doesn't.
Well, basically, he said, stop buying commercial appliances because they break and
They're
there's no way to
convenient,
fix them.
but my experience has not been that great, and that's
right.
why.
But if you use FreeNAS, then it's going to work, and that no matter what, you'll be able to recover it somehow.
Absolutely.
Because even data recovery companies like Drive Savers now support ZFS. I had a friend who had a ZFS thing where, due to human error, the array was messed up.
Uh-oh.
And 99.9% of the data was got back by Drive Savers.
Oh, good.
Yes.
ZFS was no problem for Drive Savers. That's good
Nope.
to know. All right, well, I think that brings us to the end of this week's episode, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, all right. So you can email the show, TechSNAP at Jupiter Broadcasting, or hit that contact link. Don't forget, we got the subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. You can supply stories if you like, or, if you see a Hall of Shame submission you think we haven't done one for a while, give it some upvotes. That way it gets up to 7. It needs at least 7 votes before we will induct it to the Hall of Shame. And you can either submit those or vote for those over at links.techsnap.tv. Also, don't forget, TechSNAP is live Thursdays over at jblive.tv at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
And over at jblive.info for the audio edition as well. All right, Alan, well, you have yourself a great week. Yeah, I called it up boats, chat room. I called it up boats. That's right. That's how I said. That's how I said. All right, everyone, thanks so much for tuning in this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.